Hello guys, welcome back to my channel and enjoy this fanfic part 3. Now let's start the fanfic. I know a lot of things, especially about Uzu's fall, and your roll it in, Uncle Ryusuke. Naruto snarled at the man before him. As the redhead's face scrunched in concentration, Naruto attempted to reach his friend, though the link that had been established some time before. No good. Either the link is being blocked somehow or he is not listening. Naruto cursed to himself. Who the hell are you? The man cursed in contempt. You are really stupid. To think that you actually got away with betraying Uzu for so long. Tell me, how did that work out for you? I suppose that no one knows of your betrayal though. How did you keep that a secret? Clearly you couldn't find a new village if you are here as a nuke nin. Does the word, uncle, not mean anything to you? Naruto retorted. Uncle, Kushina had a kid, the man yelled in surprise. Naruto smirked sadistically at the man as he drew his sword. Yeah, as a matter of fact she did. Interesting, isn't it? Although I was actually hoping to run into you sooner or later. Honestly, I had been hoping for later when I was more versed in our family's jutsu, but now works for me. Ryusuke said nothing as the blonde before him drew the blade at his side. He had never expected that Kushina of all people would have a kid. She was so independent, so the thought of her actually settling down was foreign to him. Yet here was the proof before him. He looked nothing like the Uzumaki clan though. Was the boy lying? He had to be. I don't know who you really are and I don't care. You are going to die right here for attacking this place. Ryusuke snarled, drawing his own blade. You don't care about much, do you? Certainly didn't care about your home or your family now, did you? Naruto replied. After a moment of silence, the two vanished from sight and the only sound that could be heard was the clashing of swords. The fight between the two Uzumaki had begun. With Sasuke, the two shinobi in the room stood completely still, not moving at all. No words had passed since the initial remarks, and from the looks of it none would anytime soon. The two were still both waiting for the other to make a move when the sound of steel meeting steel rang in their ears. So Ryusuke has started dealing with the blonde brat, huh? He won't last long. Sasuke's opponent sneered. Ryusuke. Uzumaki. Sasuke queried, catching the man's attention. I'm surprised that you know that name. What's it to you though? Nothing much to me, but for the blonde brat, it means everything. Looks like the Dobi got his wish much sooner than expected. Sasuke said, straightening himself and beginning to brush the dust off of him. The man twitched in irritation at the clear disinterest that was being shown. He had known that the Uchiha could be quite proud and arrogant, having fought a few himself in the past, but this was something else. What wish did he get sooner rather than later? The Dobi gets to the traitor to the spiral, his uncle. Sasuke said calmly as he dusted the rest of his clothes off. The man's eyes widened at his words. The blonde was Ryusuke's nephew. That couldn't be possible. Everyone in Uzu died when the attack happened. Ryusuke made sure of that. It had always been an interesting story to hear from the swordsman. To think that there was the possibility that he had missed a survivor. By the way, you wouldn't happen to be Maros the Mantis, would you? Sasuke asked absent-mindedly. Yeah, so what? The Mantis part would be for your summoning contract with Mantises, right? Your point. I think that would make a good gift for a friend of mine. A Mantis summoning contract, Sasuke said as if he expected the man to hand over his summoning. Are you always this arrogant? Maro snapped. In the words of a rather famous Uchiha, it's not arrogance if you can back it up. By separating me from the rest of my team, you have only ensured that I can fight all out. So in the end you only sealed your demise. Sasuke replied as he reached behind him and drew his sword. Maro narrowed his eyes and then widened them in shock, barely able to lift his kunai in time to parry the slash meant to take his head. There had only ever been 4 people known to move anywhere near that fast: Shisui Uchiha, Minato Namikaze, the Yondaime Reikage, and the Nadaime Hokage Tobirama Senju. Yet somehow this genin of all people had just moved at speeds that rivaled theirs. This would not be an easy battle. Shino and Hinata, The silence of the night that accompanied the massacre was eerie to Shino, and in all honesty he had hoped that this part of the mission would end quickly. His wish was granted, just not the way that he had hoped, when another explosion echoed through the night. It didn't take long for Hinata to scan the area with her Byakugans and find the cause. "This is Lavender Fox, do you copy?" Hinata said through her headset. "Go ahead." Kakashi's voice echoed back. It appears as if some enemies either moved in after Shadow Fox finished his surveillance or they managed to hide from him. Shadow Fox and Hawk are currently engaged in separate battles from each other. Both are fighting one opponent each and both seem to be holding their own at the moment. Hinata reported to her sensei. Silence sounded for a few minutes before his voice came back. "I see, proceed with caution. I highly doubt that they will be in any danger. Continue to monitor the situation and if it appears necessary head to their location to provide backup. I am too far away to be of any use to them right now. I will continue with the objective. I'll get back to you," Kakashi said, interrupting his own sentence. Another quick check confirmed that the Jonin had also been ambushed. "Can you send some of your Kikai ahead to scout for us?" Hinata asked the Aburame only to follow his gaze to the end of the hallway. Standing at the end was a tall woman sneering at them. "Lovely," Shino said, summing up the situation. Hinata couldn't help but agree. "So might I have the honor of knowing the names of my prey, or should I just call you both pests and be done with it?" she taunted. Neither shinobi answered as they both tensed and prepared for battle. "Have it your way then," she said, charging forward. With Kakashi. "I see, proceed with caution. I highly doubt that they will be in any danger. Continue to monitor the situation and if it appears necessary head to their location to provide backup. I am too far away to be of any use to them right now. I will continue with the objective. I'll get back to you," the Jonin said, eyes narrowing at the man slowly coming out of the ground. "Copy, Ninja Kakashi. Who would have thought that I would get the strongest of the rats? Guro the Unyielding. Interesting to meet you here. I would have thought that you would be hiding from the hunter Nin after you still," Kakashi countered, making the man see red. He had only said one sentence and yet it was condescending. "You have a lot of nerve coming here, Hitaki," he gritted out. "I have nerve coming here to complete a mission," Kakashi echoed, making Guro twitch. Despite only repeating the sentence back to him, he had made him sound stupid. "You little, you know what? I am going to you now," he said, rushing forward. Easily deflecting the straight punch, Kakashi brought his knee up and buried it into Goro's abdomen. Proceeding to knock the man away, he looked over at him in boredom. "So can we take the little kid gloves off, or am I going to have to walk you through this battle?" Kakashi asked in genuine interest. The red returned as the man struggled to catch his breath. Rumor had it that Kakashi had gotten much weaker over the years, yet somehow now that he was fighting him, Guro had to disagree. If anything, the copy Nin had gotten stronger. He had the feeling that he may just be out of his league. However, he was too enraged to care about that as he began to surround himself in chakra. He was going to the bastard if it was the last thing that he did. Back with Naruto. "Is that the best you have, uncle? I would have thought that someone who would willingly destroy his home would be a bit, stronger," Naruto asked as he gazed at the man before him. Ryusuke was kneeling before him, struggling to catch his breath. The kid was better than he had initially thought. Despite the fact that he claimed to be an Uzumaki and have not learned a lot of their clan training, he was far too adept with his sword. "Who are you really? There is no way that someone who hasn't gotten that far with their lessons would be able to fight on par with an elite like me," he demanded. "Elite?" Naruto snorted before starting to laugh. "I've fought plants and corpses stronger than you. How are you an elite? You arrogant little bastard. Hey, I met my dad. Even if it wasn't for very long, I still met him," Naruto shouted furiously. Ryusuke blinked and then groaned. Somehow his opponent had gone from being a serious shinobi to a little kid. "Are you even stable, mentally?" he deadpanned. Well, in all honesty, since being able to hear voices usually denotes a mental ailment of some sort, and most people who suffer from those disorders are deemed unstable, and I can hear 9 of them. "No, I am not," Naruto deadpanned back. Both Uzumaki stared at each other for a moment before leaping back into the fight. Neither willing to give, but only one was too stubborn to admit defeat. Naruto knew that he had to be careful around the man as he was much stronger than he was letting on. He also knew that the man couldn't be trusted. He had after all led to the destruction of their home village. The battle continued with neither side willing to budge an inch as they focused on not giving an opening to their opponent. The air was thick with tension as the two battled, and for a moment it seemed as if neither were going to budge. Naruto was familiar with being stubborn in battle. After all, that was how he beat Neji, Gaara and Kagaya. He never gave up even though he had wanted to just sleep in some of the battles in order to stave off some of the weariness. As they battled, the building was shaking from the intensity of the other battles around them. Jumping apart to regroup and reanalyze his battle plan, Naruto glared over at his uncle. He was truly living up to his reputation. I think that this battle has gone on long enough, don't you think so, brat? Ryusuke asked the blonde, who stood and fixed him with a cold stare. I do believe that you have drawn one too many breaths, yes. He retorted. Then again, seeing as we are both Uzumaki, this battle could last forever. However, while we may both share the same genes, I have something that you don't. Naruto informed the traitor before him. What? Back up. Don't make me laugh. Maro, Guro and Hiyari are already dealing with them. You are alone, face it, kid, you lost. Maro the Mantis, huh? Looks like Shino will be getting a new summoning contract when this mission is over then. Naruto said offhandedly. Then as an afterthought smirked. Especially if Maro is the one fighting the Tem down below. Ryusuke blinked at the sheer confidence that the genin had in his friend and scoffed. You really are overconfident, you know. No, I just have a reason to be fighting and a reason to win and walk out of here. A good reason, unlike you. Naruto snapped and shot forward, wanting to end the battle quickly. If he knew his team's luck and Hiyari was who he thought she was, then Hinata may be in danger and he wasn't going to let her get hurt or die before he could say anything. He refused to lose her again. Ryusuke, on the other hand, had not expected the sudden speed burst and had barely managed to jump out of the way of a fatal attack. He wasn't able to avoid the attack completely, however, and received a semi-deep wound in his chest. It was then that he realized the blonde had been holding back and hadn't been serious at all. Fine, if that is the way that you want this to be, then I will no longer hold back either. Not reacting to the news that his opponent had been holding back, Naruto kept his gaze steady. Bring it, Ryusuke the Dragon Tamer. Once I defeat you and you die, I will be able to claim our clan's dragon contract from you. Naruto replied calmly. Ryusuke growled and released the seals that had been binding his power. He had no intention of holding back at all. The battle had reached a new level and it was going to be explosive. Sasuke's battle. Neither side was budging, and in all honesty, it was probably a stalemate. Each knew that one misstep would more than likely end them. Neither was willing to take that chance. Sasuke and Maro stared each other down in silence, waiting for the other to move. After their first attacks were either parried or dodged, they had been staring silently at one another. Both knew the value of patience. Unfortunately, only one of them was able to maintain their composure. I think it is time that we end this, Uchiha. Be my guest and try. Honestly, I am a little bored. I get more of a challenge out of Sensei's water clones. Sasuke said in a completely bored tone. Moving swiftly, Maro attempted to take Sasuke by surprise, only to be knocked backwards through a wall. Groaning, he sat up just in time to avoid a fireball heading his way. Jumping to the side, he was quickly met with Sasuke's grinning face as his foot connected with his side. Normally, an attack like that, even from an equally leveled opponent, wouldn't have sent him too far, but Sasuke had amplified the kick with his chakra and not only sent the man flying through the wall but out of the building as well. Following the man, he moved swiftly and sent him further away from the mansion and farther into the woods. Maro was furious. Somehow the kid had managed to outmaneuver him, and it was somewhat embarrassing. Catching his footing, he began to leap through the trees, dodging fireballs as he went. He was hoping that he could lose the boy in the forestry, but that was quickly proving to be an impossible task. until he noticed that the fireballs were barely flying in his direction. Was the boy just firing them off in any direction? Was he trying to burn the forest down? Coming to a stop in a hollow of a tree, he watched patiently for the Uchiha to dart by. However, the longer he waited, the more paranoid he became when the Uchiha never showed. Had Maro been paying attention, he would have noticed the sky filling with thunder clouds. Hinata and Shino were, for the most part, managing to hold their own against the woman that had attacked them. She was a strange shinobi with seemingly no pattern or form to her style. Luckily for Hinata, she had practice fighting against Naruto's more unpredictable styles. Despite being so far behind his classmates, Shino seemed to be doing a fairly good job of keeping pace with the battle as well. However, they were wearing down faster than she was, and that was a problem. Shino, I need a favor. Hinata whispered to her comrade. I'm listening. I have been experimenting with my Juken style. I haven't perfected it, but since she seems to be a close-range fighter, it seems to be the best choice. However, it is not perfected yet, and as a result I will need to be covered and have a few minutes to gather the chakra necessary for this particular variation. She said to her mostly silent friend. I'll do what I can, but try not to take too long. He said, standing. He knew that at best he could buy her a minute or two with his current level. How hurt he would be at the end would be another story. Nodding, Hinata moved out of sight and began to focus her chakra. She really hated to ask Shino for such a dangerous favor, but at the same time she truly needed some time. If she could pull the new variation off, she would give them a fighting chance. She had to force all other thoughts from her mind, as hard as it was for her. Naruto-kun, we could really use some help right now, she thought to herself. With Naruto, the battle with Ryusuke had been one-sided ever since the traitor had mentioned that Hiyari was in the mansion. Naruto had left Ryusuke no time to counter-attack at all. It was all the older Uzumaki could do to prevent a fatal wound. Somehow the boy had tripled his speed and strength with no warning. Jumping back to put some distance between them, he tried to think of a way to create an opening to change the tide of the battle. It was then that the mansion shook violently as a loud explosion could be heard. Naruto raised an eyebrow and smirked. It was Maro fighting the Tem down below, right? Yeah, so what of it? I hate to tell you, but he is dead. That explosion could only have been caused by one technique. No one has ever survived that technique. Naruto informed the man. Well, except for Itachi. He thought to himself. To think that he would fall to a genin. Pathetic. In case you hadn't noticed, we aren't exactly genin. Naruto said, sweat dropping at his uncle. Ryusuke just glared and smirked. He had managed to gather the necessary chakra for the technique he had created while training under his dragon summons. Nephew or not, I think that it is time to die, Ryusuke said as his body became encased in a silver sheen of chakra. The force that was being released from it was immense, and Naruto gritted his teeth. The last time he had felt anything like this was when the Jubi had been revived. Before he could blink, his uncle was in front of him. The force of the blow to his face sent him flying through the wall and outside of the mansion with little to no resistance from the walls. As he crashed to the ground and skidded for a few feet, he cursed. That had hurt a lot. So that was his phantom dragon armor. Similar to A's lightning armor, he can increase his speed astronomically while increasing the force of his attacks. Most likely it will have some effect on his ninjutsu as well. Naruto thought to himself as he stood shakily. Looking up, he saw his uncle smirking at him. Do you like it? Phantom dragon armor. That actually hurt, Naruto said, sheathing his sword. It would no longer help in this fight. Kurama, is there any way to use your chakra the way I used to yet? A minute at most. You have a long time to go before you can use it freely like before. If you use the Rasenshuriken, I would say 30 seconds. The fox replied, making Naruto groan. He didn't know if he could finish this that quickly. He also knew that the 5 minutes to gather senjutsu was also impossible. He had no other choice, he had to try. As Ryusuke took a step forward, he paused to see the blonde suddenly encase himself in a golden chakra similar to his armor. However, While his was refined and barely visible, Naruto's was nearly pouring off of his body. Without warning, the blonde was before him and he was the one that was sent sailing. As he managed to catch himself and land on his feet, skidding back a few feet, he growled, looking at his blood relation only for his eyes to widen comically. There was no way anyone but an Uzumaki could have created that. Kakashi. The trip through the halls was silent as the Jonin pushed himself towards Hinata and Shino's last known location. Neither were ready to face any of the remaining three. However, he also knew that it was possible with their teamwork that they could stall and overpower two of the three. Hiyari, what is she doing here? How is she still alive? Why now? He thought to himself. Another explosion caught his attention, but he forced himself to keep moving. If the first one had been Sasuke, then that was without a doubt Naruto. Hopefully that meant that there was only one left. With his luck though, it was her. He could only hope that the two genin could protect themselves against the woman known as the Mistress of Torture. Back with Hinata and Shino. Shino gritted his teeth as he was knocked back once more and summoned his Kikai back to him. She was even stronger than he had thought. He was at his limit and hoped that the minute and a half that he had bought Hinata was enough. Just as the woman appeared in front of him, she was knocked back, howling in pain. She had no time to recover as Hinata followed through with her initial attack. Shino was actually impressed. Her fingertips were not only filled with chakra but with both of her elemental natures. Each Jukin strike was sending fire and lightning chakra through the woman's tenketsu, most likely causing irreparable damage to each point that was being struck. She had somehow taken the style her family was best known for and made it even more dangerous. Hinata, on the other hand, was gritting her teeth as she continued to her opponent. The chakra natures alone were hard enough to maintain at the same time, and she was attempting to use the 128 palms before mastering the technique. She had been making immense progress with her family's style with Naruto's assistance, and as a result she was already learning the advanced techniques of her clan. Of course she had kept this progress from her family as she wanted to surprise them once she had mastered it. The fire and lightning combination was not only damaging the tenketsu, it was causing damage to the nerve endings in the general vicinity of each tenketsu. If performed correctly, the victim would be unable to do much of anything for a short while after the technique connects and would never be able to use chakra again. It was a last resort technique she had made for this precise moment. For when she wouldn't have the backup of her team or the luxury of fighting long distance. Landing the last strike, she jumped back next to Shino, panting with exertion. Sorry that took so long. I still have trouble combining the two elements in the same place. She apologized. Shino just shook his head in amusement. Only you would apologize for using an impressive technique to buy us some breathing room at the least and end the battle at most. He replied, making the girl blush. Glancing down the hallway, she looked at the fallen girl and winced. Do you think it is over? I hope so. I don't think that we can last fighting her for any longer. Shino whispered. They were both exhausted and injured. Neither of them would be able to hold her back if she got up. In addition, despite the appearance of the technique being simple and easy on the chakra reserves, it wasn't. Hinata wouldn't be able to do it again, and the only reason she could in the first place was because she had used her lightning element to make herself move faster. That hurt. You bitch, the woman snarled as she struggled to her feet. Hinata flinched slightly as the enraged woman actually succeeded. Why can't I move right? The snarl had seemed to increase in viciousness. How are you still moving? Hinata squeaked. I am a ninja. This is nothing. I'm going to you and I am going to enjoy it. She sing-songed. I think that I'll start by plucking your eyes out, little bird. ... Then I'll chop off your fingers. She giggled insanely. Hinata and Shino flinched at the tone and started trying to come up with a plan. The woman was clearly insane and obviously dangerous, but to think that she was that unstable. As she took a step forward, the wall next to her exploded and she was engulfed in a massive stream of fire. The screams that she released were unsettling, and both genin knew that they would be having nightmares. As the fire died down, Hinata breathed a sigh of relief as the figures that stepped through the hole. Naruto-kun. Sasuke-san. You okay, Hinata? Shino. Naruto said in a slight panic. Nodding to their concerned comrade, Hinata felt herself tear up as Naruto wrapped his arms around her. It's okay, Hina-hime, he whispered, not even noticing that he had slipped and used the pet name that he had given her when they started dating. Rubbing her back soothingly, he let her whimper into his shoulder. Who was she? Shino asked quietly. Hiyari, the mistress of torture. She was a nuke nin of Sunagaku who specialized in torture. Unfortunately, she was also unstable and soon began to torture civilians as well. When the Cage caught wind of her crimes, he ordered her to be dealt with, believing her to be too dangerous to even send to prison. Somehow she managed to evade the ninja after her and disappeared from the world. This is the first I have heard of her in a while, Kakashi said, coming up from the other side. Shino felt himself flinch. A shinobi had been able to hide mental instability for that long and only got caught because of the victims that they chose. It was terrifying to know that someone like that existed. Nice work, Sasuke. Naruto. Don't you think that was a little overboard though? He asked his genin. Looking up at the Cyclops, they blinked at him. Huh? Did you say something? They chorused. Kakashi's sweat dropped as he fell on the receiving end of the response that he normally gave his friend, Guy. Never mind. Shino. Hinata, are you two okay to continue? Hi, Kakashi-sensei. Shino whispered. Hinata just nodded from Naruto's arms, and after a moment they continued through the mansion. Glancing at each other, Naruto and Sasuke nodded, their minds made up. It didn't take long before they reached the office that Gato had holed himself up in. Kicking the door in, Naruto tried not to laugh as he heard it connect with several of the man's bodyguards. Hey there, mind if we come in? Kakashi chirped. Back at Tazuna's house, Kurenai looked up from her watch position as she saw the forms of the other ninja step from the foliage around the bridge builder's house. Despite the fact that they had obviously met with an actual challenge, they all seemed to be alright. What happened? I thought that there were no shinobi. She asked in concern for her little sister. They either snuck in after Naruto's clone dispelled or managed to avoid detection. Kakashi informed the woman. There were only 4, but unluckily Shino and Hinata wound up with the more unstable one. Unstable? Oh. Nay. Kurenai felt her eyes widen in fear. Hiyari was there. She almost screamed at the top of her lungs. The whole team felt themselves flinch at the volume. Yeah, she was. She is no more. She never will be anymore. Naruto growled, his arm wrapped around Hinata protectively. This was not missed by Kurenai at all. On the plus side, we accomplished what we wanted to get done and now we all want to sleep. Sasuke said tiredly. He hadn't expected the Kirin to take so much out of him. He still had a lot of work to do. More training when we get back, I guess. Kurenai just nodded and let the team head inside silently. She had no idea what to make of the fact that Shino and Hinata had managed to hold off and survive an attack by Hiyari herself. Somehow she was starting to think that there was some truth in the rumor that Team 7 was cursed. The next morning, Tazuna, Inari and Tsunami looked up in shock as the shinobi sat down to breakfast as if nothing had happened, albeit a little quieter. Inari had no idea what to think of them as he had been certain that they were going to die. Gato's mansion has been destroyed and Nami shouldn't be bothered by anyone under his employ again. We have Gato in a prisoner scroll if you would prefer that Nami deal with him instead. Kakashi informed his hosts, making Tazuna choke on his breakfast. Furthermore, all of the food, medical supplies and money that Gato had that rightfully belonged to Nami are in separate scrolls. We have recovered 20% interest for all of the money that you were taxed from his personal savings and included it in a scroll with everyone's name on it. All you have to do is open the scroll to release it. We will leave it up to you to divide the supplies evenly among the villagers. All that is left is to defeat Zabuza. Sasuke informed their hosts. Tsunami felt her jaw drop in shock. In one night they had somehow undone nearly 3 years of Gato's tyranny and managed to return everything that the man had stolen. The females that Gato had kidnapped that we found in the mansion were left with the town's doctor for medical treatment, and we will ask for the rest to be tracked down when we return to Konoha. Whether or not the Sandaime agrees is another story. We have recouped the fees for the false statements on the mission request as well as the difference in the mission cost, so you don't have to worry about that. We have enough from what we took from Gato to pay for that mission to find the girls should you agree. Naruto whispered. He had not slept well. Images of what might have happened to Hinata had he and Sasuke not made it in time to save her had plagued his dreams. Memories of how he had lost her the first time filled the gaps between nightmares. Thank you so much. Tazuna whispered in happiness. Nodding tiredly, Naruto stood and headed for the door. I need to take a walk. I'm still tired. He whispered to Kakashi, who nodded in understanding. He had heard Naruto talking in his sleep and understood that he hadn't slept well. The birds chirping in the morning and the sun shining down made the morning seem so much more peaceful. As the sounds of nature surrounded her, a lone girl gathered herbs for her injured comrade. The sight that met her as she made her way to another spot was not one that she had expected. One of the ninja from before was sound asleep under a tree with a rabbit next to his head and birds using him as a perch. She should him, but at the same time she wasn't sure if she could after what had happened to Zabuza. Morning. Naruto whispered, startling her. I'm a light sleeper. I heard your footsteps, he said, making her eyebrows raise. I see. Why are you sleeping out here? Couldn't sleep all night, so I took a walk and fell asleep here after sitting down for a moment. He answered honestly. He had honestly forgotten about this meeting. I see. Want to help me gather herbs? Naruto stood stretching and, as he had before, helped Haku gather the herbs that she needed to heal Zabuza. For the most part the conversation was the same as well. As she was standing to leave, she smiled at the boy. I'm a boy, she lied. Naruto smirked in amusement. No, you're not. I have a good sense of smell and I can tell that you are a girl. As it is, you just finished your menstrual cycle. Anyway, do me a favor, would you? Tell Zabuza that Naruto is looking forward to fighting him again, this time one-on-one. He said, shining out of the clearing. Haku's eyes widened and she herself raced back to the hideout. How had he known? Zabuza will be ready and at the bridge in 2 days. Naruto informed his team. Everyone looked up startled. I thought that you went for a walk. Kurenai nearly yelled. Rolling his eyes, Naruto sat down. I did. I ran into his partner in the woods. Given the herbs that were being gathered and the damage we did to him, he will be fighting fit in 2 days. Naruto said with a knowing smile. Sasuke nodded to himself. He had always wanted a rematch with the Yuki. Sasuke, Haku is a girl this time. He whispered to his friend, making Sasuke blink in confusion. Wasn't Haku a boy though? Perhaps. That was what Haku said, but I didn't have nearly as much training with my sense of smell back then to tell if it was the truth. I know for a fact this time. He replied, making Sasuke hum mentally. I see. Kurenai will escort Tazuna to the bridge just in case today, and we will rest up some more for Zabuza. Kakashi said, knowing that they would need at least another day of rest before they were fighting fit. Kakashi-sensei, we need to talk. Shino can come too. In private. Naruto said as soon as the bridge builder and Kurenai left. Kakashi nodded and they headed upstairs. As soon as the door was closed, security seals were applied and everyone turned to look at Naruto expectantly. Sasuke and I decided that you and Shino would be told the truth last night. You earned it. I am not Naruto Uzumaki. He said and motioned for Kakashi to sit back down. I am Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze, the 31-year-old Rokudaime Hokage. Sasuke and I are the only 2 survivors of Konohagakure no Sato. The room was dead silent as the 2 who didn't know were trying to assimilate what they had just been told. What? Kakashi managed to say. The Dobi and I are the only survivors of the Hidden Leaf as a direct result of the 5th Shinobi War. Unfortunately, Konoha stood alone in the end because of nearly a century worth of bad decisions in Nuke Nin. Sasuke continued. Not even Shino knew what to think of what was being said. I spent years working on a seal that would allow me to travel back in time and change the past. In the end though, after a very painful incident, I asked Sasuke to come with me. I needed the support, and as my oldest friend I knew that he would be able to help. That, and I was the only one with the reserves to do the seal with you. Sasuke added, making Naruto stick his tongue out. In the original timeline, Team 7 was composed of Kakashi-sensei, Sasuke, Sakura and myself. Team 8 was comprised of Kurenai, Hinata, Shino and Kiba. Team 7 was the one that originally got the Nami mission, and in that mission, well, things didn't go so well. No one died from our team, but Zabuza and Haku did. Unfortunately, had they lived, they would have been an asset to the Fourth War. Unfortunately, they didn't, and as a result wound up as the enemy thanks to the Edo Tensei being used. Naruto informed the group. He was giving them more information than he had given Hinata the first time. We need to gather as many shinobi as we can to stop the Jubi from being resurrected. That means that we can't allow potential allies to die until we discern whether or not they will be able and willing to help. Sasuke picked up. After a few minutes of silence and awkwardness, Kakashi finally found his voice. Kakashi and Shino stared at the two entities before them, unsure of what to say. After all, what do you say to finding out that two people you thought you know were time travelers? Kakashi was trying to get his thoughts straight. Never once had he considered time travel to be among the things that the two of them had been hiding from the village. However, being so much older and war veterans would explain the drastic change in the level of skill and maturity that they had been displaying since the academy graduation. If Hinata had known about this ahead of time, or at least some of it, it would explain why she hadn't been so concerned over the change in behavior. It would also explain why her skill set had been increasing far faster than he had anticipated. Closing his eye, he began to ponder the outcome of every way that he could respond to these claims and what he would tell the Sandaime when he got back. Shino, on the other hand, was analyzing the two of them and communing with his Kikai. If they had lied or fibbed at any point in the story, then they would have picked it up. He honestly had no idea what to say about the possibility that the two traveled back in order to stop, for all intents and purposes, the end of the world. The two of them, Sasuke and Naruto, he had always seen as practical-ish in Naruto's case, and straightforward with their feelings. He had no idea why the two of them would lie about something that important. Furthermore, it seemed as if Hinata had already been informed of this by one of them ahead of time. That indicated to him that they were analyzing everyone else around them for trustworthiness. While that wouldn't be a bad thing considering what they were up against, it told him that there were people that couldn't be trusted in the village. Perhaps even among their graduating class. Nodding to himself, he looked at the two he had come to know as friends. So, is there anything that I can do to help? The question took them by surprise, but they quickly recovered and smiling happily at the Aburame. Naruto was thrilled that they could count on the Aburame's help for their self-imposed mission. Meanwhile, Sasuke knew that it would be easier if they had more people working with them to accomplish their tasks. I honestly don't know what to say. Sensei was a genius when it came to fuinjutsu and jutsu creation, but even he thought that creating any form of time travel was impossible. However, he also taught me that nothing is impossible so long as you continue to try. Something that you have proven to me already, Naruto. If things had continued as they were without you coming back, would you have even passed your test? Kakashi finally said. Naruto laughed a little. Yes and no. I would have failed the official test. However, Mizuki would have tricked me into stealing the scroll of sealing, which would have led to me finding out about Kyuubi and eventually being allowed to pass by the Sandaime. I would still have been on Team 7, but instead of Hinata we would have had Sakura. Hinata would have been on Team 8 with Kiba and Shino. Yes, you still would have had Kurenai. Naruto said apologetically. Shino groaned. He could only have imagined just how weak his future self was compared to Naruto and Sasuke if this was what they were capable of in younger, less trained bodies. I see. Well, that is quite interesting. How far did you go with that team? Kakashi finally asked. Honestly, I never made it past Genin. I was made Hokage after the Godai passed away because all of the other candidates were already dead. So in all honesty I haven't changed my rank at all. Naruto said, surprising the group before him. For that matter, it was only after I became Hokage that Sasuke moved past Genin as well. Why would they? Hinata started and then stopped wide-eyed. They held you back because of Kyuubi. Were they retarded? Her outburst startled everyone in the room and Naruto stared at the heiress open-mouthed. He had never once heard her yell like that, let alone insult someone. Next to him, Sasuke was struggling to regain his wits as well. Shino had jumped initially, but Naruto could hear his Kikai buzzing angrily at the thought that he had been held back for something that he couldn't control. Kind of. Yeah, Naruto said sheepishly. Hinata stared at the boy in shock and then face-palmed. How could you stay loyal even after knowing that? It was home and not much was known about the Biju or the how they affected the Jinchuriki, and I was a baby when they sealed the Kyuubi inside of me. The only person that I knew of that had the Biju sealed that young had mental stability issues because of a faulty seal. Naruto said almost lamely. He had been angry at the decisions, but on some level he also understood why. That didn't mean he liked it or would have made the same decision, but he still understood some of it. Sometimes you can be too naive and kind-hearted for your own good. Shino said in amazement. Naruto just laughed sheepishly and scratched the back of his head. So why did they hold you back, Sasuke? Kakashi asked in curiosity. Sasuke twitched slightly, but he had already made up his mind to be honest about the situation. I abandoned the village to train under the traitor Orochimaru, nearly got 5 genin and 1 chunin of the hidden leaf in an attempt to bring me back, betrayed Oro 3 years later and the Ned my brother. From there I joined a terrorist organization trying to capture the Biju in order to destroy Konoha, attack the Raikage's brother and the Cage Summit, then decided to betray the organization and return to Konoha and fought against them. Sasuke said, deadpanning, making the occupants of the room groan. Kakashi was staring at his student open-mouthed and honestly had no idea what to say. In Sasuke's defense, he admitted he acted rashly and stupidly and was willing to accept any punishment that the village saw fit for his actions. It also didn't help that when he betrayed the village he had 2 different entities trying to control him. Naruto added, looking at his friend in annoyance. You had quite the trip, didn't you? Kakashi said nervously. He had never heard of a shinobi changing their minds so much in so little time. Yeah, well. The important thing is that the Dobi let me come back and trusted me with an important task. Sasuke said quietly. Even if I couldn't completely suck. Finish that sentence, Sasuke, and I will send you back. You cannot control the fact that the elders left you with such a disadvantage and that you were ambushed on a C-rank mission that turned into a trap. Naruto snapped, his voice going from lighthearted to cold and authoritative in seconds. Sasuke jumped slightly and then smiled softly, nodding at the blonde. Anytime that he had brought up Hitomi's death he had gotten snappish and reminded the Uchiha that it wasn't his fault for the way that things ended up. Sasuke. Kakashi started, only for Naruto to shake his head. Just leave it at mission gone horribly wrong and leave it at that. There are a lot of things that we will not tell anyone because they are not of importance or because it would change things too much if they were said out loud. Naruto said with a little pain in his eyes. Kakashi nodded in understanding. If you are still unsure, we can prove it, sensei. Just name a jutsu that we shouldn't know, and if we can do it then we will. Sasuke said, challenging the copy nin. Kakashi narrowed his eyes at the boy was staring at him in amusement. Chidori. He countered, thinking that there was no way that the raven-haired boy could have gotten access to the jutsu. Within seconds Kakashi was staring at not the Chidori but its stronger version, the Reikiri. Gaping in shock, the Jonin felt his mouth falling open. Looking over to Naruto to confirm that it wasn't a joke, his jaw fell completely open and his eyes bulged as he saw a perfect Rasengan in the blonde's hands. Both boys were laughing at his face as they cancelled their techniques. Okay, I believe you. He squeaked in shock. I'm glad that you do. If you want to help us, then you need to train to get as strong as you can in the next few months. We still don't know what we are going to do to stop it or if we are just going to focus on reducing casualties yet, but Orochimaru is going to launch an invasion during the next Chunin exams hosted in Konoha. Naruto said seriously. The air was thick and the tension stifling as his words sunk in. He knew that finding out that your home was going to be attacked at both its most vulnerable yet most guarded moment was going to be a bit of a shock. Orochimaru wants my Sharingan and he intends to use the exams to try and give me the heaven seal. Naruto and I still haven't decided if we should let me get the seal or if we should stop it. Before you say anything, sensei, I can alter the seal to prevent it from affecting him negatively. However, it does run its own risks regardless. The seal only has a 10% chance of survival, which is why we are still discussing this. He only survived last time because he embraced the power that the seal granted him. If he fights with it to prevent Orochimaru from controlling him this time, he may die. However, if he does get it, then he will have a readily accessible supply of senjutsu to use. Naruto said, highlighting the risks for the Jonin, whose eyes widened with realization. Standing, Naruto stretched. We should save this conversation for later and just focus on resting and training for now. Nodding, the rest of the ninjas agreed and began to mentally prepare for the upcoming battle with Zabuza. 2 days later, as the day of the promised fight arrived, the team could be seen preparing for the fight. Looking at each other as they finished preparations, they nodded and headed downstairs. Tsunami was in the kitchen cooking breakfast and Inari was sitting quietly at the table watching his mother. When he had heard that the ninja had returned from their suicide mission, he had been surprised. When they had announced that they had dealt with Gato, he had been dumbfounded. Somehow they had taken on Gato's whole army and survived. Not only that, they had brought food, supplies and money back with them. Were they right? Should he move on from the past and look forward to spending every day enjoying what he had, or no? We are ready to go. Kurenai, you may come if you wish. There is no danger to the bridge builder now. Once we settle things with Zabuza, there will no longer be any opposition to the bridge and you will be able to finish it safely. As mission protocols state, we will be staying until the bridge is done, so don't worry about that, okay? Kakashi said as he headed for the door. Tazuna nodded in gratitude as the nins left the building. They had done more than he had hoped for since coming to Nami, and he wasn't sure if they could ever repay the shinobi. The trip to the bridge was silent as the group began to develop various strategies to end the fight quickly. Despite what he had found out, Kakashi was still nervous about letting Sasuke and Naruto handle the swordsman and his apprentice alone. However, he also knew that he had to have faith in their abilities. They had developed time travel after all. Arriving on the bridge, Kakashi noted Zabuza waiting patiently in the center. Stepping forward, Kakashi called out to the other man. Shall we take this battle elsewhere so that the bridge is not damaged in the fight? I see no reason why we can't fight here. After we win, we will be destroying the bridge. Zabuza countered. Naruto snickered, catching the swordsman's attention. Why destroy the bridge? You won't get paid for the mission now that Gato is dead. Raiding his mansion won't help you either, we already did that. The blonde informed the demon, in amusement before he could ask the question. Well then, I suppose that we truly have no reason to destroy the bridge then. However, in that case, why should we even fight in the first place? Zabuza queried. You want to know what we are capable. You want to finish the fight that we had before, and you are curious as to why I called you out for a one-on-one fight. Naruto replied. Zabuza felt his eyes widen slightly at the way that the blonde had read him. Snorting in amusement, he lifted his sword and followed the group away from the bridge. While there would be the possibility that they were leading him into a trap, he doubted that they would have gone through everything that they had just to end the fight with dirty tricks. The trip was short, and when they landed, they were far enough away from the village so that no innocents would be caught up in the fighting, but close enough to get back to the bridge builder quickly if needed. Zabuza, I want to fight you alone. Kakashi-sensei has already agreed that I can. He will only step in if it looks like I am about to die. Sasuke wants to fight Haku. He is interested in knowing which one of them is faster. Again, Kakashi-sensei will only interfere if it looks like he is going to die. Naruto informed the ex-Jonin, who raised an eyebrow at the Cyclops. I trust in my genin. If they think that they can handle this, then I will not doubt their ability. I will let them try. However, I am not willing to risk their lives either. Therefore, I will step in if needed. That is part of what being a Jonin is about. He informed Zabuza. After a moment, Zabuza nodded in consent. He had his doubts about his ability to defeat the team, but surely he could defeat the blonde, right? As the combatants stood across from each other, they began to try and formalize a plan of attack. They knew that one misstep and someone would die. Sasuke and Naruto couldn't afford to let that happen. As if prompted by an invisible signal, all four rushed at each other, intending to finish the fight quickly. However, Zabuza soon realized that would be impossible. The blonde was far faster than he had given him credit for. He was nimbly dodging the giant sword as if it were child's play. Nearby, Haku was finding herself in a similar predicament. The Uchiha was far more agile than she thought possible for his build. Further complicating matters were the fire jutsu hot enough to melt her ice that he was using. Gritting her teeth, Haku jumped away from her opponent and raised her hands to weave a seal, only to pull them apart to block a kick. Sasuke had no intention of being caught in the crystal ice mirrors again and was hellbent on preventing her from using it. Granted, he knew several ways to escape now, but that didn't mean that he wanted to go through it again. Watching carefully for an opening and resisting the urge to use his Sharingan, he smirked as he finally found one. Darting forward, he swiftly broke through her defenses and pinned her to the ground with a kunai at her throat. Their fight was over. Shaking his head, he knew what Haku was going to ask, and he honestly felt a little sad that the girl had lived such a life. However, if Naruto and he had their way, that would no longer be the case. She could be Haku, a person with feelings and purpose, not a weapon. Zabuza was furious. No matter what he did, he couldn't land a hit on the boy. How was he so fast? Suddenly the blonde stopped moving and looked him in the eye. Haku was defeated. Haku was stronger than you, right? Well, just so you know, I am stronger than Sasuke. You have no hope of winning this fight, Zabuza. Surrender, he said in a calm, even voice. Despite the fact that it had come from a genin, Zabuza sensed an air of authority in it. Not gonna happen, brat. Then I have no choice. Zabuza Momochi, wielder of the Kubikiribocho, I demand that you lay down your sword and obey the oath that you took to Uzu when you received your sword. Naruto barked. The younger, more naive tone was gone, replaced by the tone of a leader and experienced shinobi. Glaring at the boy, he took a step forward, intending to swing his sword when he felt the resistance. Kubikiribocho was refusing to fight. Zabuza stared long and hard at the boy before him. Who are you really? Naruto Uzumaki, heir of the Uzumaki clan and heir to Uzu no Kuni. You owe my clan, and me, your allegiance as a member of the Seven. I ask you now, Zabuza, will you betray the oath you made to Uzu and turn your back on the clan that crafted your blade? Or will you lay down your weapon and obey the alliance with Uzu? He said, standing firm. Zabuza closed his eyes, pondering what to do. A long time ago he had indeed swore an oath to defend the Uzumaki clan and aid Uzu should they ever need it. The oath forbade him from pointing his blade against an Uzumaki unless it was a sanctioned sparring match. Furthermore, his duties to Uzu were supposed to come before his duty to Kiri. If he obeyed, he would lose the fight by default and be subject to whatever command the child gave him. If he refused to obey, he would no longer be able to wield the Kubikiribocho any longer and would be seen as a traitor to Uzu. Traitors to Uzu had very short lifespans once they were found out. He could feel Haku's eyes on him, watching in fear. Kurenai was openly gaping. To think that the boy had that much power over the strongest swordsman in Kurigakure by birth. No wonder he had asked to fight the swordsman. He knew that even if he was no match for him physically, he could also force his hand. Somehow she felt as if no genin should wield that much power over anyone. Very well, I yield, Zabuza finally said, dropping to one knee. Relaxing, Naruto smiled over at Kakashi and Sasuke. Their gamble had paid off. They would have 2 more allies in the coming war. The bridge was completed not even a week later. The village had all gotten together for a festival to celebrate their independence and new freedom. Naruto and Sasuke watched the festivities from a distance, still trying to plan what to do next. Especially with Shino not having a team. He would definitely not be ready without proper training. At the same time, he would have more time to focus on his clan training without one. Sighing as he leaned back, Naruto looked over at his friend who was staring at the lights in the village. I can only think of one possibility, and that may cause more problems than we need. At the same time, it would help to bolster our list of allies. Naruto finally said. Without saying a word, Sasuke nodded in agreement. He knew what the Rokudaime was thinking, and he agreed that it may cause more problems than they needed, but at the same time they needed Shino to be ready for the coming war. Haku isn't in the village, you know. Naruto finally said, making the Uchiha flush and nearly fall off of the roof. Glaring at his friend, who was laughing, he turned to look at him. Who said I was looking for Haku? No one. The thing is, I know you too well. You think she's pretty, he teased. Sasuke growled at the blonde, who smirked a foxy grin. So have you figured out what you are going to say to Hiashi yet? Sasuke said, making the blonde pale and slide off of the roof. Snickering, Sasuke laid back on the roof. He knew that would happen. Hiashi had nearly castrated him the first time because Naruto had gotten tongue-tied and in his nervousness had made it sound as if he were asking for something far different. "Teme," the blonde yelled. As he climbed back up on the roof and laid next to his friend, he groaned. He was afraid that it would be even worse this time because he had the memory of the last attempt. Silence passed between the two for some time before Sasuke spoke up. Do you think that they will consider your proposal? Yes, he replied confidently. Sasuke said nothing as they watched the stars for the first time in a long while. As the Konoha nin were saying their farewells on the bridge the next morning, Naruto didn't look at all worried at the lack of Zabuza's presence. After the final farewell was made, they turned and became the first people to cross the newly built, but unnamed, bridge. After leaving the village, the group traveled in silence as they made their way back to Konoha. Kurenai was quiet as she knew that Kakashi wasn't going to bite his tongue for much longer. She also knew that the Sandaime would make an inquiry into the mission and her training once she got back as a result of the injuries sustained by Sakura and Kiba. Not to mention the backlash she would probably get from the Inuzuka clan. She was jolted from her thoughts as the two Kiri nins dropped from the trees in front of them. Did you give it any thought? Naruto asked the older shinobi. Yeah, after discussing it over with Haku, we decided that we would return to Konoha with you as Uzu shinobi. Zabuza stated, making the blonde's grin grow quickly. Digging in his bag, Naruto pulled two new Uzu headbands from a storage scroll and tossed them at the two. One of many things that he had salvaged from the destroyed village. Shaking his head at the blonde's uncanny ability to predict things, Sasuke smirked at the two. Welcome to the circus. Don't ask who the ring master is, no one knows. Groaning, Zabuza and Haku tied their headbands on and the now larger group continued towards the hidden leaf. The trip was quick and silent, and before they knew it they had arrived at the gate. Waving at Izumo and Kotetsu, Naruto laughed at their baffled expressions towards Zabuza and Haku. After checking in, they headed for the Hokage's office. Once they were shown in and the door closed behind them, Naruto snickered at the Sandaime's expression. What in hell happened? He demanded, staring at the two nin before him. We went on a C rank and then an A- rank, Kurenai up. We cleaned up and Naruto seems to be entertaining the idea of reviving Uzu. Kakashi summed up the whole month in one sentence. Zabuza turned to look at the team in shock as the Sandaime whined. Somehow, in the span of not even 1 month, Team 7 had done 2 C-rank missions, 2 A-rank missions, and considering who Gato had apparently hired to him and Haku an S-rank mission. Hiruzen groaned at the group and glared at Kakashi, who merely laughed. The bandit elimination went off without a hitch. It was swift and the genin performed remarkably considering it was their first assignment. Zabuza nearly choked on air. Afterwards, our A-rank mission to Uzu was also a success in regards to getting there. Unfortunately, there wasn't much that we could salvage from the ruins outside of a few Uzu headbands and clan census records. Everything else was destroyed. Upon our return to Konoha, we received your directives to head to Nami and assist Team 8 with a mission that got out of hand. Upon arriving, we discovered Haruno Sakura and Inuzuka Kiba were severely wounded and incapacitated. Akamaru, Kiba's ninkin, was injured but not to the same severity as his partner. Aburame Shino had mild injuries which were treated on the spot thanks to Hinata's Iryo training. Jonin Yuhi Kurenai was engaged in combat with Momochi Zabuza, a nuke nin from Kurigakure. Kakashi stated and then paused to take a breath. After forcing Zabuza into retreat, we sent the injured back to Konoha, where I assumed that they received proper treatment at the hospital. After which I made the decision to continue with the mission and we escorted Tazuna back to his home. Over the course of approximately 2 weeks I continuously trained the genin and we made a successful raid on Gato Mansion. However, we were met with quite some resistance in the form of Maro the Mantis, Guro the Unyielding, Ryusuke the Dragon Tamer and Hiyari the Mistress of Torture. Thankfully we were able to defeat our enemies without suffering any severe damage. We then made our way to Gato himself. There we secured supplies for the village and took control of Gato's legit business ventures. Afterwards we waited until Zabuza was healthy enough to fight and met him in combat once more. As he swore an oath to Uzu upon receiving the Kubikiribocho, Naruto demanded that obey it. He did, and Naruto made him a shinobi of Uzu. So here we are. Kakashi finished. Stepping forward, Naruto laughed. Here is the remainder of the fee for an A- rank mission and the fines for the misleading mission request bringing Nami back to good standing with the Hidden Leaf. This is a trade alliance request between Nami and Konoha, and this is from Tazuna himself. I don't know what is in it, but he asked me to give it to you. Hiruzen was staring at the genin wide-eyed. Ryusuke the Dragon Tamer. Hiyari the Mistress of Torture. How the hell are you still alive? He yelled in shock, making the shinobi before him flinch. After a second, Team 7 and Shino shrugged as if to say, damned if we know. Falling back in his seat, Hiruzen massaged his temples. Oh, by the way, where do we turn in bounties? Naruto said with a knowing smirk. They had managed to salvage the bodies of their opponents and decided to turn them in for the bounty. That was on top of the weapons and summoning contracts that they had taken. Kakashi can show you later. He groaned in exasperation. After nodding, Naruto looked at the Sandaime. I need permission to leave the Hidden Leaf for a period no less than 2 weeks to travel for clan-related business. Furthermore, as I have decided to place Zabuza and Haku on loan to the village as per the Uzu-Konoha Treaty, and I have decided to ask Zabuza to take over Shino's training as Kurenai is obviously not capable. I feel that the arrangement of Haku and Shino on the same team will be more than enough to keep his training going until a third member can be found. Where do you need to go? As Naruto waited for the Sandaime's decision, he began to contemplate his next action should the Sandaime refuse. He knew that the man was trying to find a way to control him and he would not allow that. His actions and ulterior motives for allowing the trip to Uzu had told him as much as he needed to know. How the Sandaime had gotten away with pretending to be someone he could trust for so long still eluded the blonde. Surely you understand, Naruto, that the rules state that you are to receive no less than 3 days off as a way to help you recuperate from your mission, injured or not, right? Surely you understand that rule only applies to village missions and not clan-based missions, right? Naruto countered the Sandaime, making him flinch. He had somehow outsmarted him without even trying. What is so important that it cannot wait for you to get some rest? As I said before, the well-being of a clan member. As the two locked eyes and began an intense staring match, Kakashi merely nodded in confirmation to the unspoken question on Zabuza, Haku's and Kurenai's minds. Yes, this had become the norm between the two. With or without your permission I can go. I merely decided to try and go about this without forcing the use of my clan's name. Too many people do that lately, thinking that their clan is more important than who they are. Naruto snapped at the older ninja. Everyone in the room was silent as they watched the verbal war between the two. Be that as it may, You are still a genin and as such you are forbidden from leaving the village on your own. Kakashi would be sent on a village mission to escort you and as such I cannot send him and I refuse to take the Jonin from any other team so that you can go for 2 weeks. Hiruzen fired back. You don't need to. As a genin I may be forbidden from leaving the village on my own however, as a foreign diplomat of Uzu, so long as there are shinobi from Uzu to escort me you can't stop me from leaving nor can you retaliate for me leaving. If you hadn't noticed, there are 2 Uzu shinobi behind me. Naruto countered once more. For once the Sandame didn't reply right away as the laws were turned on him and he was left staring at the blonde before him. How had he gotten so proficient with the laws regarding the line between clan, village and foreign affairs? How had he not noticed this? Very well. However, I want you back in. The Sandame never finished as the blonde cut him off once more. You cannot place a time constraint on a clan matter nor can limit how much time I have to spend on a mission not involving Konoha. Gritting his teeth the Sandame scribbled a quick note and handed it to Naruto who looked it over, nodded and then made a copy. As soon as the copy was made he gave it to Sasuke for safekeeping. Sasuke just nodded and slipped it in his hip pouch sealing it in a storage seal as soon as it was out of sight. Zabuza, Haku let's go. Naruto said turning and leaving the room. Nodding they followed after the Uzu prince. Hinata, Sasuke, Shino you are free to go. Kurenai please wait outside while I discuss a few things with Kakashi. The Sandame ordered and the aforementioned ninja bowed and left the room. Well, what did you find? Did you discover anything? The Sandame said as soon as the door was closed. Just that the port villages that used to work with Uzu have absolutely no love whatsoever for Konoha or its shinobi and believe that the village had something to do with Uzu's destruction. Naruto is very clever and highly observant when it comes to traps and the invading forces left almost nothing to salvage. Most of what we managed were, as I said before, clan census records and a family tree. Outside of the headbands that Naruto scavenged out of what was a storehouse there was nothing left. The whole place is a wreck and I think it was picked clean at one point. Kakashi lied smoothly. He had been trying to come up with a viable lie that would work with the Sandame ever since he found out about Konoha's role in Uzu's destruction. I see. Has Naruto opened up about anything? Just that he thinks that you and the village are unnecessarily smothering him and that he wants it to stop. He also believes that it could be possible to revive Uzu by tracking down any survivors that may have escaped. However, to my knowledge has no plans to actually do so. He has been hiding his true strength this whole time because the village has not given him a reason to believe that he wouldn't be sabotaged more than he already had been. Kakashi lied once more. Hiruzen leaned back and sighed. He had been afraid of that. Perhaps the boy had not been as loyal as he had once thought that he had been. Had his exuberance and hyperactivity in regards to what he thought was a familial relationship just an act too? What of Sasuke? He has been hiding his strength as well in order to prevent the village from worshipping him more than they already do and treating him as they did Itachi. Hiruzen nodded and motioned for Kakashi to leave and send in Kurenai. Obeying the copy ninja sighed in relief at getting away with the lie. Although he would hate to be Kurenai right now. With Naruto. As Zabuza, Naruto and Haku raced through the forest towards their destination the only thing on their minds was how the Sandame had fought fervently to keep Naruto from leaving on clan business. Zabuza knew, from experience with other clan shinobi, that the behavior that the Sandame had exhibited was abnormal. Not even Yagura, after he began to act weird, would have protested that adamantly. Looking ahead of him he saw Naruto had his teeth clenched and his hands balled up into fists. Somehow he had the feeling that there was more going on than he had originally thought. Hey Zabuza, do you know why the Raikudo Sennin was so revered? Naruto suddenly called out. All I know is that he was apparently the first person to use chakra and created the moon after defeating the 10-tailed beast. He called back. That is why, but the thing that is never said is that he couldn't have done it alone. His brother helped him. It wasn't just the Jubi that they sealed away either. They sealed away their mother, the rabbit goddess. The moon is one layer of the seal itself. Naruto replied, making both shinobi stop in their tracks. What? Haku and Zabuza squeaked. It's true, Naruto said, turning around looking at his companions. The only thing that is really sealed in the moon is the Jubi's body and the rabbit goddess herself. The Jubi's chakra was split into 9 fragments. Then that means that the Biju are just fragments of the 10 tails itself. Not just a fragment. They are their own person. They have their own personalities and quirks. Likes and dislikes are also present in their personality. By definition, that makes them human, does it not? When you put it that way, Naruto-san, then yes, they are human. Haku replied softly. Why did you decide to bring that up now? I just wanted to make sure that you understood that I will allow no disrespect of the Biju in my presence. Naruto said softly. He had endured more than enough of hearing the Biju constantly referred to as beasts for his liking. Turning and continuing his trek forwards, he was contemplating the way that he would be able to accomplish his goal without causing a war. Heading into the Hyuga manor, Hinata quietly made her way down to her father's study, knowing that he was probably worried about her. Knocking on the door, she waited for the stern man to give her permission to enter. After hearing a very quiet, "Come in," she entered the room and flinched a little at seeing the council in the room as well. If this is a bad time, father, I can come back, Hinata said, knowing that the council would probably complicate some things. No, it's fine, her grandfather Hisashi said, looking over at the incompetent female. He had never approved of her soft-spoken and gentle ways, but no matter what he did, he could not get his son to see that allowing her to take over the clan would only bring disaster. Furthermore, he couldn't get his son to remarry and produce a male heir. Hisashi narrowed his eyes at the older Hyuga and then glanced at Hinata. How did your missions go? He asked, surprising the council of elders. It went well. Both missions were completed in record time. On our way home, we were ordered to go and back up Team 8, who had some difficulties. Unfortunately, Kiba and Sakura were rushed back to the village in critical condition. Akamaru was badly wounded as well. However, we were able to finish the mission despite the appearance of Zabuza Momochi, Maro the Mantis, Guro the Unyielding, Ryusuke the Dragon Tamer, and Hiyari the Mistress of Torture. The bridge between Nami no Kuni and Hai no Kuni has been successfully completed, and I am on a mandatory 3-day break because of the missions. I think Kakashi-sensei said that between the time that we left and the time that we returned, we had completed 2 C ranks, 2 A ranks, and an S rank mission. She informed the clan head, making everyone's jaws drop in shock. None of the ninja that she had mentioned were easy to defeat by any means on their own. Yet Hinata, the most gentle person they knew, was standing before them, having survived encountering all 5 of them. I take it that the Jonin did most of the work, Hisashi said arrogantly. Kurenai-san was ordered to stay with the client at the time that we raided Gato's base, so she wasn't even there. Kakashi-sensei did indeed take out Guro the Unyielding, but Sasuke was the one who took out Maro the Mantis. Naruto-kun took out Ryusuke the Dragon Tamer by himself as well. Shino and I were the ones that fought Hiyari the Mistress of Torture. Hinata squeaked. She knew that her grandfather was looking for any reason to discredit her hard work, and she wasn't going to let him get away with it. Before the old fool could say any more, Hisashi was in front of his daughter, looking for missing limbs and/or irreparable damage. What was Kakashi thinking, letting you fight them on your own? We didn't know that they were there. They managed to avoid being detected by the scouting team that had been sent to determine how many people were working with Gato. We only found out that they were there after the fight started, and we had already split up to make sure that no one escaped, and we had covered all of the entrances. Hinata said quickly, trying to prevent her father from reviving the plans to build a tower to put her in. Still, he could have been far more careful, Hisashi said, sitting back, satisfied that nothing was missing. Giggling a little, Hinata gave her father a true smile. She had missed him. With Shino. I'm home, Shino called out, entering his clan's compound. While he had expected his parents to be worried, he had not expected them to nearly asphyxiate him. Are you all right? His mother nearly screamed at the boy, who nodded mutely. Shibi could understand his wife's concern. When they had heard that over half of his son's team had returned and were in the hospital in critical condition, he had been very concerned over his safety. He had immediately run to the hospital to try and see if anyone could tell him where Shino was, only to be told that none of them had regained consciousness and that they had been brought to the hospital in a stasis scroll by one of Kakashi's ninken. He had been fretting over his son's safety ever since. "I'm fine," he said, and then proceeded to tell them everything as they headed into the kitchen to get some tea. He had missed being home. Several days later, as the entrance to the village loomed ahead of them, Naruto, Zabuza and Haku took a breath and then headed into the Takigakure. Stopped by one of the guards, Naruto calmly explained that they had need to see his cousin, the Takikage. Eyes widening, the guard ordered them to stay put while sending his friend to inform their cage of the visitors. It didn't take long before the nin returned and led them to the office of Shibuki, the Takikage. "My ninja told me that you proclaim yourself my cousin. This is true. I am Naruto Uzumaki, the heir of Uzu," the blonde announced to the man before him. Before Shibuki could say anything, the blonde dropped the family tree on the desk and watched silently as he read through it. "You'll notice that the name of my father is blurred for my safety. I am trying to locate and confirm the health and safety of all surviving Uzumaki now that the traitor to Uzu and the reason it fell, Ryusuke, is dead. As Taki was the closest that we had a treaty with, I decided that I would come here to check on the well-being of both of my cousins. Speaking of which, where is your sister, Fu?" As soon as the words left his mouth, he felt the atmosphere change. It was almost as if Shibuki had gone from being a friendly person to a frigid monster. "Fu is out on a mission and won't be back for some time," he said curtly. "Really? Your refusal to let me see her wouldn't be because she is the Jinchuriki of the Nanabi now, would it?" Naruto fired back just as curtly. The ninja in the room were waiting for the opportune moment to flee, knowing that there was no way that they would survive being caught in a fight between them. "Even were that the case, how did you know that she was a Jinchuriki?" he asked frigidly. "Takes one to know one now, doesn't it? I know who all the Jinchuriki are and where they are right now. I know that Fu is in the village just as I know that she is in the building," he replied, keeping his gaze even. "What business is it of yours what I do with that abomination that at our parents?" Naruto's eyes widened slightly and then a fiercing intent spread through the room as he struggled to contain his temper. "You will either bring her here in one piece and in good health, or I will find her myself. I will not repeat my orders to you as the heir of Uzu. Have I made myself clear, Uzumaki Shibuki?" he hissed vehemently. The cage recoiled from the blonde in fear. The intent coming from the blonde was stifling and it felt monstrous, inhuman even. "What are you? A pissed-off Uzumaki with enough power to blow this country off the map at my disposal but enough common sense not to. Are you going to bring her here or not?" Zabuza and Haku looked at each other briefly and felt themselves gulp a little in fear themselves. He wasn't just pissed off, he was in a murderous rage. After a second, Shibuki motioned to one of the guards and they bolted from the room as quickly as they could. The intent died down a little and Naruto began to tap his foot impatiently. After a few minutes, the nin returned with a petite girl who looked as if she hadn't seen enough sun lately. Her mint green hair and orange eyes were kind of an interesting mix. "Hi there, Fu, I'm Naruto, your cousin," the blonde chirped, making her eyes widen a little in shock. "So how's Chome doing? How did you know Chome's name?" "She told me. Now do you wanna come home and live with me? I am trying to rebuild our clan and as you are a member of it that includes you." "Absolutely not. Can I really?" came to replies simultaneously. "I wasn't asking you, Shibuki, so shut up. This is a clan affair and that means that you are not invited." "I am a member of the Uzumaki clan," he yelled indignantly. "You are? I thought that you were worthless as a human being and were impersonating an Uzumaki, my mistake. I'll fix that immediately," Naruto replied, picking the family tree off of the desk and making a few marks on it. "There, the mistake has been rectified. Now then, Fu is a member of the Uzumaki clan, would you like to go home with me?" Haku was trying to contain her laughter at the expression that Shibuki was making. I would love to, but Shibuki won't let me go. Shibuki doesn't have a choice. As a member of the Uzumaki clan, I have final say over my clan members, and as you are one, I can bring you home with me without his permission, as I feel that you are in danger here. Naruto said, shrugging. If he doesn't like it, I am sure that I can get a hold of your maternal aunt and let her know what has been happening. I am sure that the daimyo would love to be informed of your treatment at the hands of your ex-brother. Shibuki said nothing as his face turned an interesting shade of red. After a second she nodded, and the blonde smirked at the fuming cage and turned to leave the room. After a few steps he snapped as if he had just remembered something that he had forgotten. Right, I almost forgot. Haku, those tags that I gave you on the way here can be used now. Haku's eyes widened in realization as she disappeared from view and quickly placed a tag on each of the people in the room's back, outside of Zabuza, Naruto and Fu. Nodding, they headed out of the room, and just as Shibuki was going to yell for the shinobi nearby to stop them, Naruto sent a wave of chakra into the tags, causing the seals on them to activate. With nothing more impeding their exit, Naruto's group was out of the country before the affected shinobi knew what had happened. What did you do to them? Fu asked in curiosity. I erased their memories of your existence. As far as they know, nobody named Fu ever lived in the village, and if I am right when it comes to how you were treated, then the rest of the village won't care enough to say anything. Naruto replied, giving her a foxy grin. Giggling, she followed her cousin through the forest as they headed for Konoha. Fu didn't care where they went so long as she remained with family that cared for her. By the time that the group returned to Konoha's gate, Fu had undergone a startling transformation. No longer was she pale and looking starved. She had gained a healthy look to her, and she was rather tan. In addition, she was wearing a very flattering white battle kimono that Naruto had picked up for her. They had spent the extra time training her massive strength in order to get it under control, as it was obvious that her old village had not taken the time to do so. Passing by Izumo and Kotetsu, they headed straight for Training Ground 7, knowing that Kakashi would be there. Most likely training Sasuke, Hinata, and taking over some of Shino's training as well. True to his thoughts, they were there. Hey sensei, Naruto called out, making the four ninja turn to look at the group. Dobi, Sasuke said, happy that his friend was safe. He was worried that perhaps he had been attacked by the Akatsuki while he had been gone. Shino, I want you to meet your third teammate. This is my cousin Fu, she holds the Nanabi inside of her. Naruto said chirpily, making the girl falter. How could he so easily say something like that to someone? Doesn't he understand how that could affect their relationship as a team? As introductions finished, Naruto nodded happily at his friends. He had hoped that they would like Fu, and his faith had paid off. Looking around the training field, he smiled in amusement, knowing that Shino had been put through the ringer with Kakashi's training program. Looking over to the other genin, he smiled once more. How about we all go out for some ramen and get to know one another better, and then I can explain some things that I know have been bothering you. Naruto suggested, getting everyone's attention. Laughing at Sasuke's look, he darted off without waiting for anyone to agree. We might as well follow the ramen addict. This way, Sasuke groaned, leading the newcomers through the village. He had somehow known that the Rokudaime would somehow bring ramen into the occasion, but hadn't expected him to take off the way that he did. Arriving at Ichiraku's, he glared at the bubbling blonde who was bouncing in his seat. You could have waited, and why is it always ramen with you? Sorry, I was excited, and it is not always ramen. I haven't had any ramen since before we left for our first mission. He replied indignantly. Rolling his eyes, Sasuke quickly placed an order for some curry ramen and waited as the rest of them placed their orders. Once that was done, he looked at his friend and Kage and waited for him to begin. Okay then, now that that is done, we can get onto business. Shino, I am going to place Fu on your team. Zabuza will be in charge of your squad, as I have said before. This way I know for a fact that you will be trained and ready for anything. Furthermore, we will need to get in touch with Asuma's team, Kakashi-sensei. His team isn't nearly close to being prepared for one attacker, let alone an army if it comes to that. Naruto snorted and then sipped at his sweet tea. Kakashi merely raised an eyebrow at the genin but nodded. Guy's team as well. With any luck we will be able to whip Neji into shape before he pisses Dobi off. He might actually lose his head. Sasuke added, musing aloud to himself. Naruto just grunted in response, and before more could be said their food began to arrive. Setting their conversation aside, they began to eat their lunch. Back on the training field. Okay, now that we have full stomachs, what we need to do is arrange for group training sessions between all of our teams. That way we are all improving and Shikamaru gets some form of motivation behind him. Naruto said, flopping to the ground. Fu had no idea of what they were discussing or why it seemed like Naruto was giving orders to his Jonin as if he was the one in charge of the team, but as no one was saying anything she decided to stay quiet. Zabuza and Haku were just as confused, but they knew that the boy had more than some sway in the village and a secret that he was protecting. I can discuss it with them and hopefully they will agree. Actually, I think I will discuss the possibility of doing survival training with all of the teams. I would have to get that cleared with the Sandaime, but if it is approved we will be able to train in seclusion for a while and be able to show off your skills without the Sandaime spying. Kakashi replied seriously. Naruto nodded and sighed, leaning back against the tree. Once we have spent enough time alone I will be able to discern who should be told and who should be left in the dark. Zabuza, Haku and Fu will be told once we are out of Konoha, but everyone else needs to be tested as you were, sensei. Kakashi nodded in understanding and he glanced over at Zabuza. Have you ever had a genin squad? No. The swordsman trailed off. He had a very bad feeling. Let me show you what my team does on a regular basis for training. Hopefully you will get some ideas for your team. Kakashi said sweetly. Nodding a little concerned, Zabuza, Haku, Shino and Fu leaned back to see how Team 7 trained. Shino had a decent idea of what to expect, but the other three didn't. He actually found the idea of them seeing it firsthand amusing. Smirking to himself, he knew that the show would be well worth the slight delay in training. Several hours later, when Kakashi finally called for a break in the training, he noticed that the swordsman's eyes were merely coming out of his head. He laughed to himself and sat down next to the startled Uzu Nin. Next to him, Fu and Haku had similar expressions. Meanwhile, Shino was struggling not to laugh at his comrade's state. He had also thought that the training that Team 7 did was absurd when he had first seen it, and now he had someone else to share that opinion with. You alright, Zabuza? Kakashi asked him as he unsealed a bottle of water and took a sip. You do that every day? He nearly screamed in shock. No. Oh, thank goodness, I was starting to thin. We do that while on a mission or have just finished a mission. This is relaxed, Kakashi added, making the man gape even more. Are you insane? Not even Kiri's training program was that brutal before they changed it. If it had been, there would have been no one left to take the exam. That's not entirely true. I have merely constructed a training program meant to bring the full potential of my genin out based on what they were capable of when we met and how fast they learn. The only thing stopping a shinobi from excelling is themselves. Kakashi replied to the shocked shinobi. Nearby, Haku and Fu were struggling to remember how to talk. What the hell? Haku finally exclaimed uncharacteristically. That was all it took to send Shino into peals of laughter. Both girls looked at the boy and groaned as they realized that he had known that this would happen and he had not warned them. You could have warned us. Haku growled. Shino giggled and looked over at her. Why? At least someone else knows how I felt when I first saw that. He managed before breaking into uncontrollable laughter once more. Rolling her eyes, Haku leaned back pouting. What are you training for? The end of the world? Fu asked somewhat sarcastically, not really expecting an answer. Precisely, came the unanimous reply from the whole team in a tone that implied that they were dead serious. Zabuza blinked at the Jonin next to him and then narrowed his eyes at them. I think we deserve an explanation as to what is going on here so I know how much training my team needs to get done in a short amount of time. After a second, Naruto nodded and sat down to explain. The thing is, Zabuza, You and Haku were supposed to die on the bridge in Nami no Kuni. He started making the two of them gape. Taking a deep breath, he told them everything that he had told Kakashi and Shino. The looks that ran through the three newcomers ranged between anger, shock, frustration, sadness, and determination. One lengthy explanation later. So that is that, Naruto said, sipping on his water. The silence was deafening as he looked at the three before them. So, Haku died protecting me and I died trying to take Gato with me. Zabuza whispered, never once considering the other way that their battle could have ended. Or that they had come against a Jinchuriki and the strongest to boot. I lost Chome. Fu whispered, feeling fear creep through her. Yes, but I don't intend to let that happen again. That is why I am changing things. However, we have run into a bit of an unexpected situation. We expected things to change when we began to diverge from the original timeline, however, they are diverging faster than we anticipated. Team 8 was never meant to get the Nami mission. Naruto replied seriously. I see. You need us to be prepared for anything as soon as possible with no delay. Zabuza said after a minute of digesting what he had heard. Exactly, especially with what is coming. Sasuke said, sipping at his own water. During the next Chunin exam to be held in Konoha, we will be invaded. That is only a few months away and this village is not prepared in the least for this. Very well, Zabuza said, standing and picking up the Kubikiribocho. Then I suppose that we stop wasting time. Team 8, let's go, we have training to do. Naruto smiled as the team ran after their new Jonin and leaned back. You can release the privacy seal, Sasuke. Nodding, Sasuke did as instructed and Naruto smirked. You can come out now, Team 10. You are good at information gathering but nowhere near good enough to beat a censor. Kakashi raised an eyebrow as they came out of the foliage with a shocked expression. Trying to train their stealth, Asuma. They did good hiding from my nose but never took into account Hinata's Byakugan or that we may have a censor on the team, and I doubt that you brought it up. How the hell is your team still alive after that level of training? Asuma demanded. Kakashi laughed. They don't have a choice. If they die, they still have to finish their assigned exercises. Asuma gaped openly at his friend in shock. How is Kurenai? I doubt that she took her tongue lashing well. Kakashi asked, making Asuma flinch. She got demoted back to Chunin and put on gate duty. When she got home, she lit into me for it, and after trying in vain to get her to calm down, I broke up with her because I really don't need that in my life. Asuma said, sitting down. Sorry about that. I guess that she is still sore from the tongue lashing I gave her when we arrived to back up her team. Asuma shrugged nonchalantly. She was becoming overbearing anyway. She was so bossy when we were together, and heaven forbid I talked to someone who was single while I was with her. I wouldn't hear the end of it for a week. Wasn't that Zabuza Momochi just now? Shikamaru finally asked. Yup. He works for me now. Naruto chirped, standing. Well, we will see you guys later. We have to do our run now. Nodding to their friend, Sasuke and Hinata tore off after the blonde, and once they were out of sight, Kakashi started snickering. What run and what is so funny? Asuma queried. Their 20-mile run, of course. Although, I guess I forgot to tell them that I turned it into a survival-based obstacle course. After a few seconds he added, I should also adjust the seals they are wearing. I haven't increased the weight, gravity or resistance in a while. Asuma gaped as Kakashi made a quick seal, and then shouts could be heard in the forest. It almost sounded as if Naruto was cursing Kakashi's firstborn child. Speaking of which, Asuma, I was thinking of doing some joint group training sessions with you, Guy and Zabuza. Are you interested? 6 weeks later. Well, now it seems as if all of your teams have been increasing at a very steady rate. I see no reason why I shouldn't allow you to take on a group survival training mission. Hiruzen said after looking over the results of Team 7, 8 and 10. However, are you certain that you want to bring Team 9 as well? They have a year's head start on your teams. Zabuza had almost a decade on mine and Kurenai's team when we met. Kakashi pointed out. Guy felt himself twitch involuntarily. He had felt that something was off when Kakashi had challenged him instead of the other way around. When he had won, he had insisted on Team 9 joining them on a survival mission. He should have just refused. Guy, are you okay with this? Of course, Hokage-sama. Guy shouted with all of his normal enthusiasm. Kakashi shook his head as he heard Naruto growl and watched Guy flinch. Ever since they had run into Guy's squad, Naruto had been working on curbing the unnecessary shouting him and Lee tended to do, and the last time Guy didn't tone it down, he woke up in the women's hot spring while several Anbu were relaxing. Very well. I see no reason not to approve of the request. Hokage-sama, I would also like to take on missions while doing the survival training. It would be good field experience for all of them. Furthermore, the village would still be operating without losing any manpower. Kakashi added, making the other Jonin groan. When Zabuza and Asuma had started training together, he had made them almost terrified of Kakashi's obsession with working the genin almost to death. I see. I can send Pakun back to the village to drop off mission reports and pick up new missions based on where we are in the training. Kakashi added, making the Sandaime nod. Despite wanting to keep Naruto and Sasuke in the village where they could be watched more easily for any more erratic behavior, he knew that refusing in front of the other Jonin would raise questions that he was not willing to answer. Signing the required forms, he handed them over to the copy nin and leaned back. Any idea of when you intend to return to the village? In time for the Chunin exams, Hokage-sama, came Kakashi's reply. Nodding, he watched as the four teams left the room and he sighed. Somehow he felt as if things were going to go horribly wrong soon, and he wasn't sure if he should try to figure out what was coming or ignore it and hope that it went away. Kakashi made sure to stop by the mission hall on his way out and pick up quite a few missions for their trip to start with. He actually found the look on the Chunin's faces hilarious before he mentioned that they would be split between 4 teams, which is why he needed so many. He headed home and began to pack the things that they would need for the trip. He wasn't going to allow the future to come true if he could help it. He wouldn't fail Obito and Minato-sensei, he refused. At the Hyuga estate, Hinata darted to her room hoping that she would be able to get everything ready quickly. Due to the type of mission that they were going on, she knew that she would need more than she normally carried on her. Especially medicinal supplies. As she packed more clothes, her mind began to wander as she tried to discern what Naruto-kun had wanted to speak to her father about. Naruto gulped as he knocked on the Hyuga Patriarch's door and waited for permission to enter. After hearing the stern man call out, he entered the room and bowed to the man before him. He was more nervous now than he had been the first time. Hiyashi-sama, I wanted to ask for permission to date Hinata Haim. He said, hoping that it had come out steady and didn't reflect any of the nervousness he felt. As Hiyashi stared him in the eye, he felt a trickle of sweat run down his face. Somehow he felt as if the room was shrinking. Crap, I'm panicking again, he thought to himself. The trip to the pre-selected training grounds was mostly quiet and uneventful. No one knew what to say, and for the most part they were more curious in the sudden trip. Neji, for one, was trying to figure out why he had been forced to go on this trip. In his mind it was a waste of time. However, he wasn't about to disobey an order. He just had to accept the challenge, didn't he? He grumbled bitterly. Team 10, on the other hand, was terrified of what was to come. They had seen the training that Team 7 did on a daily basis and had no idea how they were going to survive the trip. The only thing they could think of was when were the Chunin exams. The Jonin were quiet for an entirely different reason. Zabuza and Kakashi knew what was coming, while Guy and Asuma were merely trying to avoid being detected. Naruto was still trying to recover from the meeting with Hiyashi. As soon as they arrived, Kakashi looked around and nodded to Sasuke. Both teams watched in both shock and fascination as the raven-haired boy placed several layers of seals meant to erect barriers, ensure privacy and detect intruders. The area that the seals covered was massive. Turning back to his Jonin, Sasuke motioned that the barriers were in place. That was when the almost 20-hour silence was broken. Set up your tents and then try to get some sleep. We'll be getting up early tomorrow and we will need you rested for the training that you will be doing. Kakashi said, turning to the teams. As the genin turned to follow orders, Asuma looked at Kakashi and narrowed his eyes. What is going on, Kakashi? This is out of character for you. Guy raised an eyebrow. The genin began to pay more attention while continuing their task. All in due time, Asuma. There is no point in telling you now, besides that is Sasuke and Naruto's decision to inform you. It is their secret. Guy blinked as everyone turned to look at Team 7 only to sweat drop, noticing that their tent was already up and all three of them were already asleep. None of them wanted to miss out on the precious sleep that they were most likely not going to get during the training. Glancing over at Team 8, Guy realized that they too had also finished setting up their tents and were out cold. How they had done so as quickly as they had would forever remain a mystery. Resigning themselves to waiting for the answers they wanted, the rest headed to bed. Unfortunately, for the weary teams, morning came far too quickly, and before they knew it, they were gathered around a fire eating some kind of stew that Sasuke had cooked before anyone else had awoken. Setting their bowls down as they finished, Guy looked over at the two silent genin that had been acting oddly for a long time. Kakashi said that we would need to get our answers from the two of you. Naruto and Sasuke groaned. They were not looking forward to giving the explanation again. Sighing and taking a deep breath, Naruto looked around. I'll answer when everyone is done eating. I don't want anyone to choke. Naruto trailed off, realizing that somehow everyone had finished in the span that the sentence had taken. Okay, fine. Do you want the abridged version or the detailed version that may take an hour or so? Asuma blinked and then shook his head. The version that gives the best explanation for what is going on, why we are here, and what is causing you two to act so strange. Pretty much the long version then. Sasuke deadpanned, making everyone twitch. Sasuke and I traveled from the future to stop the end of the world. Naruto confessed, making everyone that hadn't already known blanch. That can't be possible. Neji choked out. It is. You see, in 3 years' time, a criminal organization called the Akatsuki will declare war on the entirety on the shinobi world, which will spark the Fourth Shinobi War. Naruto started. Were they insane? Every nation versus them would have been the shortest war ever. Ino interrupted. In a way, yes, it was short. It lasted about 3 days once the fighting started. Sasuke replied, making everyone smirk. At the cost of approximately 2/3 of the world's ninja population and the village of Kumo being razed to the ground. The smirks faded to horror as they digested what had been said. Not even Teams 7 and 8 had been informed of that. How? Shikamaru stuttered out. The long version it is. Long story incredibly short, Obito didn't die, sensei. He was saved by the evil will of the Jubi and Madara Uchiha, who was also still alive. He tried to return to Konoha only to witness Rin's death. As a result, he decided that he would go along with the plan to resurrect the Jubi. Working together with Zetsu, Obito gathered 10 of the strongest nuke nin in the world and repurposed the Akatsuki from a resistance to Hanzo the Salamander to an organization hell-bent on capturing the 9 Biju. Some of the members include Kakazu of the 5 Hearts, a Taki nin that once tried to the Shidaime Hokage, Hidan a Jashin worshipper, Sasori of the Red Sand, and even Itachi Uchiha. Furthermore, Orochimaru used to be a member as well and considered one of the weaker members. Naruto explained, making the colors drain even faster from the nin before them. Sasuke then spoke up. They managed to capture the Ichi through Nanabi fairly easily. However, their initial attempt to capture the Hachibi ended in failure. It was after that the Raikage organized a 5-cage summit. Obito declared war at the summit. It would have originally been 7 against 80,000 shinobi, but not only were they able to create 100,000 Zetsu clones, one of the members used to work for Orochimaru and managed to do a mass Edo Tensei to further strengthen their forces by resurrecting some of the strongest ninja in history. The Akatsuki and the deceased members of the 7 swordsmen included. Sasuke explained. Naruto picked up from there. In the first day alone, 40,000 ninja from the allied shinobi forces were. Granted, they also managed to cut the Akatsuki's forces in half, but when the Edo Tensei were brought into the mix, it basically became a slaughter. Among the resurrected were former Kage and unfortunately the one person that was unbeatable. Naruto flinched a little and looked at the sky. Who Naruto? Kakashi asked, fearing the answer. Inwardly, he was praying that it wasn't Minato. Uchiha Madara, who had finally passed away. The problem is Madara has no weaknesses. As an Edo Tensei he was immortal and would never run out of chakra. Finally, he had manifested the Rinnegan not long before his death. No one could touch him, and if they did he barely felt it. It got even worse when they finally resurrected the Jubi. Once the Jubi regained most if not all of its former strength, Madara absorbed the Jubi and became even stronger. We could barely touch him. Then the rabbit goddess was released from her prison in the moon. Honestly, she was easier to fight than Madara was, and we actually beat her. Naruto said sheepishly. The group looked at him oddly. Sasuke laughed a little. Dobi was the only one that could sense Zetsu at the time, and as a result he was able to sneak up on Madara and managed to rip him in half, allowing for Kagaya to absorb the Jubi. Neither Naruto or Sasuke expected the Jonin from falling over. So Madara's biggest ally betrayed him. Ino squeaked. No. Zetsu was never Madara's ally, he was using him to free Kagaya. Anyway, after we were able to reseal the Jubi and end the war, everything went to shit. Konoha began to lose its allies because of a century's worth of poor decisions and the level of nuke nin that were produced that assisted in the Jubi's resurrection. No one could trust the village, especially after the decisions that were made by Danzo were brought to light. Assassinations he did without permission, wars started, and other various problems. While dirty secrets are normal for a hidden village, the fact that the Sandaime had allowed it to happen for around 60 years. Not long after, it was discovered that despite resealing the Jubi, its chakra had seeped into the ground, poisoning it. It began to spread in the animals and crops. Naruto stopped for a breath. As a result of the poisoning, resources became scarce. The Dobi was able to hold it off for a while and stop it from affecting Konoha with the senjutsu that he had learned. However, when he had offered to do the same for the other countries, they refused. They wanted nothing to do with Konoha or its nin. Eventually the countries began to fight for the resources, and Konoha, which had yet to be affected, became their target. We had the most untainted food, water and medical supplies. This started the Fifth Shinobi War. Sasuke said quietly. The mood had grown somber. At the time that the war started I was about 18 or 19, and when we did the jutsu to come back I was 31. That was how long we managed to last on our own. Naruto whispered. Unfortunately, it was not to be. Eventually the enemy forces made their way to the gate, and that was when we did the jutsu. It was a village-wide consensus to do it while the enemy was being held off by the remaining forces, even though the backlash would everyone within the village walls. Either way they were going to die. They just decided that they would die to give us a fighting chance to save everyone. No one said a word. The knowledge of what was to come was weighing on them. Now that they had most of the details, the group wished that they hadn't known. What Naruto and Sasuke had lived through was more than a nightmare and explained everything about their personality changes. I can't imagine the Hokage allowing you two to come back like that on your own. They should have been the one to come. Not that I don't like you two, but why are you laughing? Ino snapped at the boys that had fallen over. The Hokage did come back. Sasuke howled. Ino blinked and then squeaked. No way. Sasuke, did you? Absolutely not. After betraying Konoha twice, do you really think they would let me be the Rokudaime? Dobi was the Hokage. Jaws hit the ground at Sasuke's declaration. Not only had Naruto succeeded in his dream, Sasuke of all people had betrayed the village twice. Not to mention the creator of the seal and ninjutsu that was used to come back. The jaws fell even lower. Don't look so shocked, I told you I would be Hokage. Besides, with all the painting I did as a kid in the academy, don't you think that fuinjutsu would be a logical step? I would be legally allowed to draw on things. Naruto protested before falling into another bout of hysterical laughter. Asuma held his head as he realized that the most surprising ninja of Konoha had surprised everyone every step of the way. So why are we training until the exams? Also, why the insistence on doing missions during the training? Shikamaru interrupted. The laughter stopped immediately. In several months' time during the final round of the Chunin exams held in Konoha, Orochimaru, as the Otokage but disguised as the Kazekage, will invade Konoha with the forces of Oto and Suna at his side. Not only will the Sandaime die, but so will many other ninja. At least that is what happened the first time, but things have already begun to change. Regardless, we have to be ready in case it does happen. Naruto replied, dead serious. The group froze as the information sunk in. If that is true, then why haven't you told the Hokage and let him deal with it? Ten asked, feeling a little fear. I don't trust the conniving backstabbing. Naruto snarled, startling everyone. Sasuke jumped and put his hand on Naruto's arm. Please calm down, Hokage-sama. He whispered, catching Naruto's attention. Groaning, he held his head. He knew the questions would be coming. Mostly from Asuma. What? Why? Asuma and Guy sputtered, not having expected such an outburst. He let Uzu be destroyed. He let my family die before I even got to know them. He knowingly kept me from my godparents. He let me live in the orphanage when I have two perfectly good homes to live in inside the village. He kept my inheritance from me. He got Sasuke's family. He did nothing to properly prepare Konoha for Orochimaru even after he was made aware of the pending invasion, and he pissed me off by lying to me for years. During the war, the so-called professor and successor to the god of shinobi barely did anything of use. You tell me why. Naruto was struggling to control himself, and he could feel Kyuubi's chakra rising. The campsite was quiet as they digested what they had heard. If what you are saying is true, then that means that my dad broke one of Konoha's oldest and most important treaties dating back to the village's creation. Asuma nearly yelled in shock. Kakashi looked away. It's true, Asuma. We went to Uzu and reviewed the day that the attack happened. A call for help was sent out within 5 minutes of it starting. The forces of Uzushiokagear waited 4 days for reinforcements before they finally fell. He whispered, making Asuma feel sick. He had no idea that his father could do something so callous and cruel. Shikamaru, the most prominent clan in Uzushiokagear and the founding clan of the village, were the Uzumaki. Just as the daimyo was an Uzumaki. Sasuke answered before the curious Nara could speak up. Dobi's mom was one of the only survivors, and only because she had already gone to Konoha on request of the Shodai's wife Mito Uzumaki Senju. The area fell silent once more. After a few minutes, Shikamaru looked around and nodded to himself. What are we waiting for then? We have a village to protect and a traitor to deal with. To Naruto and Sasuke's surprise, everyone in the clearing nodded. Then Neji thought of something. Naruto, you and Sasuke said that some of the strongest ninja to live had been resurrected. Naruto cut him off before he could finish. I'm afraid so, Neji. Your father was one of them. As was Asuma, as he had died prior to the declaration. Team 10's eyes widened and Neji felt anger welling up inside of him. How dare they vandalize his father's grave and disturb his rest? I agree with Shikamaru, let's get to work. He stated with barely concealed anger in his eyes. Naruto nodded and looked at Kakashi. The first week of the training was hell for everyone involved. Kakashi didn't let up on anyone, including the other Jonin. Naruto and Sasuke piped up every now and then to offer suggestions, but for the most part they merely followed orders or, if they had already completed the exercise, worked on something else. It didn't take too long for the group to see just how much training they needed to do in order to catch up either. Despite being in younger, weaker bodies, Naruto and Sasuke were doing laps around them in almost everything. Even Hinata and Shino had surpassed them as a result of training with them. One of the things that the two time travelers were dealing with was making sure that everyone was at the level that they had been at the beginning of the Fourth War before teaching them anything new and teaching them the strengths and weaknesses of each of the Akatsuki. Half of the day was grueling physical training and the other half mental and medical training. As a result, they were already make leaps towards their final goal. Looking around at the group of genin training themselves into the ground, Kakashi smiled to himself. After hearing what the two boys had gone through, the teams had made it their personal goal to make sure that they don't go through it again. Or at the very least alone. Looking down at a list of things that he had made for their training and the missions that they had picked up, he nodded. He had planned for certain missions to be done at certain intervals, and it was time for them to start doing their training missions. All right, everyone. I want you to take a break and come over here. I think that it is time for the first of the missions. Depending on how these ones go is whether or not we do more right away or do some more training first. Kakashi called, getting the attention of the genin, who stopped what they were doing and headed over to the silver-haired man. They had been working themselves practically to death, and this was the first time that he had decided to call for an intermission to that torture. Now then, I know that some of you have made your firsts already, however, I have been informed that some of your jonins have not made it that far. As such, we will be taking care of that today. There is a massive bandit camp to the south of here that has been causing some trouble for the nearby villages. Normally we would have done this sooner, but I was waiting for the whole camp to be present so we don't have to take too much of our time to track them down. Gather your mission supplies and be ready to go in 5 minutes. He informed them as they darted off. The last time that someone wasn't ready in the specified amount of time, the whole group was punished. Looking over at his fellow jonin, Kakashi smiled at them. Enjoying yourselves? Several miles away, the bandits were stretched out relaxing as the door to their hideaway closed. They had been fortunate enough to make an abandoned fortress their main home, and they had made sure that they were safe in it. It had taken almost 2 years to repair the damage that had been done to the building, but there were few if any problem areas. It was because of that they were comfortable believing that they were safe. After all, who would actually hire ninja for a group of bandits when the total number of enemies was unknown? That was one thing that the cage would want before approving a mission. Hey, any luck out there lately? One of them called to a friend who was lounging himself. Not really. I think we will need to spread out more. The areas around here have been picked clean, and the boss doesn't want us to bring anyone back here so that the ninja aren't called in. He called back. Sighing, he reached for a drink and settled in for a long night. The whole group came back every once in a while, and when that happened it got real noisy really fast. He rather enjoyed it when it was quiet because most of the fortress was empty. Up on top of the fortress, watching for anyone suspicious, the guards were growing bored. No one ever dared to come out this far, so why did they need to stand as lookouts? They would prefer to be inside partying with everyone else. Or better yet, raiding some town or village and having a different type of party. Unfortunately, the guards were not ninja, and they were easily dispatched when a dark blur raced from the shadows and swiftly broke their necks. Landing on the ground, Lee flinched at the bodies below him and did a quick scan of the roof. There were no visible enemies in his line of sight, and he waved quickly behind him. Several Naruto clones slid out from the shadows and transformed into the deceased, taking their place. The bodies sealed away for later disposal. Each sector of the fortress that they could get to had a similar chain of events. The groups had been informed that they needed to make it a bloodless so that the replacements wouldn't raise any suspicion. So far they had managed without any issues. By the time that all of the sentries had been dealt with, Naruto had clones in place of the now deceased bandits. Instead of keeping everyone out, the sentries would now keep everyone in. Kakashi nodded as all of the advanced infiltration squads reported success. The plan had been simple. Get the faster, less squeamish genin to dispatch the visible guard, and then have Naruto's clones take their place. From there they would silently make their way inside of the fortress, dispatching any enemies that they find along the way. They would either hide the bodies or seal them away so that they had a longer time to deal with the group. The Jonin would interfere, if it was necessary. However, this mission was to prepare them for war, and as such they could hold their hands. Alls were to be bloodless as possible. If not, then the blood would have to be hidden as well. So far there were no problems. Each team reporting as they went. Are you sure that this is a good idea, Kakashi? Regardless of them being ninja, they are still kids. Asuma whispered, worried for Choji's well-being. He was a gentle kid after all. They agreed to stop being kids and carry adult responsibilities when they accepted their headbands, Asuma. We are merely telling them to uphold that vow. he whispered. Nodding quietly, the older man looked at the fortress and felt himself become anxious. They had never practiced a mission with a complete communications blackout before. The genin were on their own and had to rely on their teammates completely. The Jonin would only know if something went wrong. A chakra flare was sent out. Somehow though, Kakashi and Zabuza didn't seem concerned. Haku finished her mission and she's heading to Ino's team to act as backup. Zabuza reported, smiling as a wall of ice sprang up in front of them. What? Guy asked in shock. Haku has replaced every reflective surface with her ice. We can now see everything that is happening inside of the fortress, thus allowing us to keep track of the genin. Zabuza explained. Why didn't you tell us this? Asuma asked in shock. Haku wasn't sure if she could set up that many surfaces or not. If she couldn't, then she would have an invisible sheet of black ice follow each team instead. Zabuza whispered back, making the man nod. Better to not say anything before knowing what was possible. The Jonin watched almost at an agonizing pace as the genin crept through the hallways, sometimes having to pick off members of a group one by one, other times able to deal with their enemies without issues as there weren't that many. Internally they were all hoping that they would be alright. Kakashi and Zabuza knew that most of their teams were fine having done this sort of thing before. However, Zabuza still worried about Fu. She had never done anything of the sort. With Ino's team, Ino wasn't enjoying herself. When she signed up to be a ninja, she had purposefully ignored the more gruesome parts of the job. She knew that she would be faced with reality sooner or later, but she had honestly expected it to be later. Now, however, she was slinking through an enemy fortressing everyone that she ran into. She hadn't wanted to in the first place, but she was not going against Kakashi's orders. The last time that she did, she was certain that she almost died. Haku rejoining the group almost scared her senseless as the girl seemingly phased from the wall. Haku couldn't help but give the blonde a reassuring smile as she slid from her mirror. She had hoped that she would be able to give a complete inside view, and she had. The training she was doing with Kakashi and the other genin and jonin was improving her ice release a little every day, and she could already see the results. Glancing over at the other member of the team, Haku gave a reassuring smile to the Akamichi, who looked more than a little pale. He was a lot like she was. He hated fighting Anding but would happily do so for his precious people. She wanted to give him some words of encouragement, but that would mean talking, and they weren't allowed to do that. Choji was struggling to come to terms with what he was doing. He didn't like hurting anyone. He had always seen being a ninja as a way for him to protect his loved ones, but he had always tried to ignore being part of the job. Yet now, he was being asked to confront it head on. He wasn't sure that he could, and in all honesty, he wasn't sure how long he could stay silent. However, the girl next to him seemed to have found a way to deal with it on her own despite feeling like he did. Maybe he would ask for some advice. Looking ahead, he steeled himself as they came upon another group of bandits. The attack was quick and their deaths painless, more than they had allotted their victims in the past. Haku was using her Senbon to target lethal spots on the neck, while Ino was using poison-coated Senbon. The poison was so lethal it in seconds. A hand over the mouth and a small prick of the Senbon was all it took for the enemy to go down. The poison was fast-acting and only took a couple of seconds to work, so her method was precise. His, however, relied on his brute strength to quickly and efficiently break their necks. Unfortunately, his clan relied too much on their brute strength and less on actual stealth tactics. As a result, his were the more brutal ones and the most traumatic of the group. Sealing those bodies away, they continued on. Shikamaru's group. Shikamaru was both happy and unhappy at the turn of events. He had always reasoned that he would be required to eventually. So the fact that he wasn't that much of a surprise. Unlike his teammates, he never ignored the more gruesome parts of being a ninja, and as a result he was less shaken by the experience. That isn't to say that he wasn't shaken at all though. He didn't particularly care to take someone's life, however, he also knew that it was a necessary evil. The part that made him happy was the excess of shadows that ran the length of the hallways. He was almost guaranteed to sneak attack his targets with a small fluctuation of chakra. While they were cautioned against using jutsu due to the possibility of ninja, he had little in ways of stealth. He wasn't particularly strong and his knowledge of poisons weren't as complete as Ino's, so he stuck with his specialty. Next to him, Fu was trembling a little. She had never been ordered to before and she wasn't sure that she could do it much longer. Unlike Shikamaru, she was capitalizing on her natural strength, so like Choji, hers were more personal. Each death she caused felt almost self-inflicted and she was starting to lose her composure. She is just glad that they hadn't had as many groups thus far. However, she knew that the closer they got to the center of the building, the more likely there was to be more people closer together that her team would have to deal with. Jumping a little as a hand landed on her shoulder, she gave a faint smile to the boy next to her. Shino watched worriedly as the girl next to him struggled not to fall apart. Fu was most likely the last person you would expect to you. However, the girl was not only a Jinchuriki but also a ninja. The fact that she had yet to make it in her career only told him more about the type of life that she had lived through. It told him that she was rarely ever let out of the country and less so alone. Then there was the lack of training that the girl had had prior to coming to the Hidden Leaf. Smiling at her, he refocused ahead of the team and reined in his thoughts. He had been asked to escort this team because he had done this type of mission before. In Nami they had a similar setup. The only difference is that they didn't enter the compound until most of the enemies had been dealt with. That strategy wouldn't have worked this time. Neji's team. Initially, Neji had been hesitant when he had been not only split from his original team but also placed under Hinata's command. He hadn't wanted to spend much time with the heiress and he wanted to have to obey the main branch even less. However, as he had proceeded down the hall, the reason why had become quite clear. Hinata had obviously already done a similar mission as she quickly and silently dispatched the enemies in front of her with quick Juken strikes. He had to admit that she had improved dramatically from the last time that they had spared, and even more so than he had thought possible for anyone. His preconceived notions of destiny had started crumbling with Naruto's tale of time traveling, and ever since then they had continued to fall apart. He wasn't sure what to think anymore. Lee was silent as he moved down the hall with his teammates. It was unusual for someone like him to be so stealthy, but he had been learning that there truly was a time and a place for his exuberance, and this was most certainly not the time. He had been slightly miffed when he had been split from 10-10, however, he could see why. While they had done bandit elimination missions before, they had never done anything close to this. Apparently Team 7 had already done one, and the Jonin had decided to pair a veteran at this kind of mission to each team so that they could be assisted with it. It all made sense, and since it seemed that they wanted to keep the groups at 3 genin or less, it was obvious that teams would be split up. Hinata, while an unlikely choice as a leader due to her shy nature, had seemingly come out of her shell and was leading the team superbly. He was thrilled to be led by her, even if Neji wasn't. Slightly ahead of the team, Hinata was trying to calm her heart rate. Yes, she had been on a mission like this before, however, she would not have said that she was skilled enough to lead the same type of mission, and most definitely not with her cousin on the team. She was still worried that she would do something to strain their already fragile relationship. Yes, Naruto had said that he would talk to Neji, but at the same time she was still worried. Plus, the last mission that she had done like this, there had been some rather powerful ninja lying in wait. She wasn't sure that she could fight another shinobi like Hiyari. Taking a deep breath, she paused as they ducked into the shadows to allow another group to pass. Nodding at each other, they made quick work of them, sealed the scrolls, and continued on. She would be happy when this was over. With 10-10. 10-10 could say with certainty that she was not going to like doing missions for Kakashi if they were all similar to this one. Take down the fortress, he said. It'll be easy, he said. She grumbled silently to herself. What part of infiltrate an old, literal, fortress and everyone inside without getting caught was easy? Plus she had been separated from her team and placed with Naruto and Sasuke to lead her. Not that there was anything wrong with the two of them personally, it was just that their teamwork was so good that they were in perfect sync all the time. This made her feel like a third wheel on a date. Granted, she knew why she had been assigned to work with them. As a weapons mistress, she had very few ways to stealthily someone. They were there to teach her. Despite not being able to talk, they were doing quite a good job of it too. Another thing that annoyed her: teaching without speaking. Looking ahead, she sighed quietly and wished that the mission would end soon. Naruto and Sasuke were having a mental conversation with one another over the ease of the mission. They had both agreed that so far it was too easy. There was little to no challenge and no one seemed concerned that people were going missing at an alarming rate. Plus there was something that made them uncomfortable. Neither wanted this mission to get unexpectedly difficult, but from the way that it was going, that was how it was going to end. Quickly dispatching another group of bandits, they headed further into their assigned sector, praying that they were wrong. Outside, the Jonin were watching the progression of the mission carefully. Unbeknownst to the Rokudime, they too were thinking the same thing. There should have been a slip-up or surprise around one of the corners, and yet there had been nothing. None of them wanted there to be an unwanted increase in difficulty, but at the same time they couldn't help but feel that they were going to get one. Well, they have cleared out the hallways. It is time for them to move down to the next floor and begin on the rooms, Asuma said, taking a calming breath. Guy nodded silently. He couldn't help but feel proud at how well his team was doing. Especially Neji. He had been worried about sending the Hyuga out with his cousin, but it seemed that his fears were unfounded. Nothing out of the ordinary yet. This seems far too easy. Kakashi whispered. I know. Something is going to happen. Though I can't see how. We have the whole building covered from top to bottom. Zabuza said, eyes narrowing. Not the whole building, just the floors and rooms with reflective surfaces. There are probably a mass of rooms and corners that we can't see. Kakashi replied, making the Jonin tense. That is when something will happen, most likely. Someplace that we can't see. Good point. Though I have to admit that I have never seen my team utilize such stealth before. Guy responded, making the other Jonin gape. Have you ever tried to make them use stealth? Good point, Asuma. Groaning, Kakashi turned his head back to the ice as the genin cleared out one room at a time with surprising ease. It wasn't that hard considering that most of the targets in those rooms were sleeping. However, every now and then they had to work fast to keep any sound from getting out. Thankfully for them, the fortress was massive and the rooms spaced a good distance apart. 3 floors in each genin team stopped at a door and nodded to one another. Outside of the main area, the floor beneath them, they were dealing with the last of the stealths. As they started to open the doors, Kakashi tensed.